All right, guys, joining us here is a UFC Hall of Famer, former middleweight champion, tough winner, commentator, and actor. He now hosts his own podcast, Believe You Me, and has recently released his new autobiography, Quitters Never Win, which has gotten a ton of great reviews. Michael the Count Bisping. Man, it feels like it's been way too long. Welcome back to Submission Radio.
Thank you very much. It hasn't been long enough, if you ask me.
Oh wow, we'll make it short and sweet, Michael. This is
No, you're good, buddy. You're good.
It's gonna be
what do you want me to do?
It's going to be a redemption for us. Hope. I was going to say we forgot to mention DJ in the intro. You're a man of many talents. As we watched you slay the decks on Twitter a few weeks ago, just wondering, man, how has the Bisping family sort of dealt with this whole coronavirus quarantine? We saw you walking around before in the Bisping Manor, which looks like a bloody mansion.
Yeah, listen, unfortunately, the world's going through a very crazy time right now. And if we all just do as we're bloody well told and follow the guidelines, it isn't 5G. There's not, the governments aren't conspiring for one world order. It isn't a conspiracy. The earth isn't flat. We just got to fucking stay indoors, do as we're told, and this thing will pass. But there's a lot of idiots out there that feel that they know better. A lot of people are insecure and they think that everyone's against them and the world's a big conspiracy. It's not a conspiracy. There's a fucking disease, an illness, a virus, which is, originated in China and spread across the world. It's highly contagious. So we're going to stay inside, do as we're told, and in a little bit, it'll pass. Or we can all be idiots, ignore what everyone's telling us, ignore what the scientists are telling us. Because I know what people say, don't believe everything you read on the news or hear on the news. I don't. What I do is listen and read medical professionals. I listen to the medical professionals, people that have dedicated their entire life to medical science. Okay, I tend to listen to them, not some knuckleheads on the internet. So to answer your question, yeah, we're good. We're not bad. It's not it's not ideal. I mean, I was just sitting there with my daughter a moment ago, very, very bored. Every day is the same. It's like Groundhog Day. But listen. What was it? I don't know, 80 years ago, we had World War II. We had World War II and it was bad, okay? There was bombs going off. There was people dying. People had to go to war. I think those people would be ashamed of the human race right now. All we got to do is stay fucking inside. It's not that hard. I understand people are struggling financially and economically, and my heart goes out to them. But as I say, in the grand scheme of things, it's not that hard. And if we do as we're told, this will pass. Sorry for the rant. There you go.
No, I love it. I love it. Where were you, almost a week ago when the shitstorm on Twitter was happening and everybody was playing the blame game? I wonder if you were sort of relieved when UFC 249 was postponed. I know we're all fight fans and we all wanted to see fights, but I think a lot of people were relieved that, fighters are going to be sort of safer. Were you sort of a bit relieved to see that fight postponed?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm going to sound like a hypocrite here, but no, I wasn't relieved. I was looking forward to it. I'm bored out of my mind. I need something to watch.
Yeah.
So I was looking forward to sitting down with my son and my family and watching a good night of fights. Obviously, when this first kicked off, the virus, when it all started really gathering momentum over here in the States, at least, I flew down to Brazil, to Brasilia, and commentated an event down there with no crowd, and there was nothing too bad. For this one, for UFC 249, I think Dana was going to arrange for testing for everybody. So they were going to try and do it as safe as possible. Anyway, as it turns out, it's not happening. It's probably for the best. But as I say, come on, everyone was looking forward to Khabib versus Tony. At least now, hopefully, we get to see it because as we know, it was Tony versus Justin.
Yeah.
But with that event being cancelled, then I think hopefully now we're going to see it booked for a ridiculous sixth time.
Yeah, sixth time. That's crazy. I mean, a lot of people are just kind of trying to figure out if those guys do get rebooked for a sixth time, where does that leave Conor McGregor? In your opinion, who do you think he should fight next now that it looks like Khabib and Tony are going to be possibly possibly fighting each other finally for the sixth time?
I have no idea, and I couldn't care less. Contact Paradigm Sports Management, and they'll tell you all about it. Or contact Conor. He'll tell you all about it, mate. Well, what do you want to ask me? I'm not here to discuss Conor.
He hasn't been
Conor McGregor fought in January. I don't fucking know. I failed to say I was part of the conversation. Nothing against Conor. Big fan. He's awesome. But you know what I mean? I'm a busy man. I got shit to do. Don't waste my time asking me about Conor McGregor. What do you want to know, buddy? What are we doing here?
Well, we got to talk about the fantastic book, Quitters Never Win, which is out all over the world. And I mean, It is a fantastic read, 4.7 out of 5. It was the review that is online right now. People can get it everywhere. Goodreads gave it 4.7 out of 5, which is a great score.
That's not bad.
Tell us, what was it like actually sitting down and putting pen to paper and writing out your life in a book? I believe it would have been a pretty surreal experience.
Yeah, well, I'd be lying if I said I sat down and put pen to paper. Didn't really, I have a quill in my hand and I sat there. No, it wasn't like that. So I'm good friends with a guy called Anthony Evans. He was a UFC employee for many, many years. He was head of PR. He ran Fight Pass. He very, very, embedded in the UFC world. He was there for like 15 years. Anyway, as I say, good friend of mine. And he's also a writer. A couple of times over the years, people came to me with book deals. But number one, I was still fighting at the time. Secondly, the first time I got offered a book deal, I think it was 2009. And I was like, well, nothing's really happened. Yeah, I'm in the UFC. I've had a few fights, but, the story's far from over. I retired, and then, an opportunity came my way to do a book. And I thought, all right, well, now the time is right. My fighting career is over. It's all said and done. And, I went through a lot of adversity in my career. So I was like, yeah, okay, let's do a book. So me and Anthony Evans, he's the writer that I picked. And we would sit down on the phone every night, he would give me free therapy sessions. The poor guy, he had to listen to me for hours on end, going through in minute detail, things that didn't matter. I'm like, no, we've got to talk about this. And he's like, yeah, but Mike, that's not really important for the book. I'm like, no. I'm going to tell you about my terrible childhood or whatever it was. You know what I mean? So, that's what we did. He would record the conversations, then he would write them up. He'd send them to me. I'd say, yeah, that's great. Or, we need to tweak this a little bit. We need to change it. So that was pretty much the process. And I think that went on, I would say, 6 months, something like that. So it took a while.
Awesome. Ant Evans a great guy, by the way. Bought us some steaks in Vegas one time. I know the Believe You Me podcast, which is a great podcast. I remember Luis J. Gomez was saying that you're a badass. You're a bad motherfucker for the way that you handled, all those fights with the eye. And I tend to agree with him. And I feel like sometimes it almost overshadows your career. That's the story. But I also think it's such a big part of it, given what you did with, the situation. Looking back on it, for those who may not understand, how much did it impact fights for you towards the end of your UFC run? I think it was pretty remarkable what you did. Yeah,
well, it certainly impacted my fight career, My depth perception was pretty much non-existent. So, people always say, how did you fight with pretty much one eye? And I always say the same answer, with great difficulty. And it was very difficult, But at that time, I think I started having eye problems in 2013. I had a detached retina, got it repaired, then it redetached, got it repaired, then I got glaucoma. And then it was just one thing after the other. I was just very unlucky, unfortunate. Just anything that could go wrong with an eye went wrong. Many surgeries, lots of pain and lots of depression, I guess. But, I returned to fighting with pretty much one eye. And, it wasn't easy. But, fighting in the octagon isn't easy. But at that time, I wasn't ready to call it quits, And in hindsight, I guess it was a blessing in disguise because in 2013, I got all these troubles, and this is when it all started to happen. And then I knew I was on borrowed time. So what that gave me the mindset that I had to create a living essentially outside of the octagon because I was just all in on fighting. And I was like, well, at any time, I might get my license pulled away from fighting. So I've got to start opening doors. So I started working on being an analyst, being a commentator, doing a podcast, really trying to ramp up my my acting career and just whatever, business endeavors I could find myself or get involved with outside of the octagon. So as I say, it wasn't ideal, and I wish I had two fully functioning eyes. But as I say, every cloud has a silver lining.
Well, that is why the title Quitters Never Win is so important for this book. I mean, from 2013, you went on to possibly have some of the biggest fights of your career. So if you would have called it quits then, we might have not seen some of the great moments that we've seen now. And I'm just wondering, when you do go up in front of the commission during that period and your eye's no good, how nervous were you, especially during some of those big fights where you were fighting for the title, defending the title, and there was so much money on the line? Did you ever come close to not fighting and the commission catching on?
No, never close. Well, I don't know about the commission. Listen, there's a lot of shit that isn't in the book. There's a lot of things that went on that I'm not going to tell you. You have a great show, podcast, whatever you want to call it. But you won't even do me the honor of showing me your camera. I don't even know who I'm talking to right now. So no disrespect in the book, and I'm not going to share it here. But so here's the thing. So you get your eyes tested once a year. So they dilate your pupils, they look under your retina, and you get passed. Now, you know, ask no questions, tell no lies. But even though you get cleared by by a doctor once a year, every time you fight, you have to see an eye doctor. And not an eye doctor. You have to do medicals at the weigh-ins. It might have changed now because, you know, the weigh-in time has changed. But it used to be 4 p.m. in the afternoon. You went to the weigh-ins and you would see a doctor there as well. They give you a pre-fight physical, make sure you got no injuries, and they shine a light into your eyes as well. And I was always terrified. I would shit my pants because, for example, I'll tell you a story. When I fought Luke Rockhold in Sydney, 2014, you know, you do a training camp. You push yourself to the limit, you make tons of sacrifices, you put yourself through all the physical pain, the emotional pain, you turn down opportunities, you got to pay training partners, coaches, all that type of stuff. Then you and your team, my team and I fly to Sydney. Obviously, I've got to pay for that. I've got to pay for hotels, got to pay everybody's food, you got to pay, you know, wages for everybody there.
Jeez.
And you might have, you know, as I said, the reality that being pulled from the fight is a potential reality. And the day before I flew out to Australia, I did a bloody sparring session, and I got a big cut open above my good eye. So when I got to Australia, me and Rockhold a couple of times, he was like talking shit. Oh, you got a cut already, Mike? And I was like, yeah, whatever. So I had a couple of stitches in there. And on the day of the fight, I'm walking into the arena, and a UFC staff member runs over to me. He's like, Mike, we've been looking for you everywhere. The doctor wants to see you. I'm like, why does the doctor want to see me? And he said, it's your eye. And I'm like, oh, holy shit. No. My worst nightmare is happening. I'm like, honestly, I was terrified. I thought I'm rumbled. The game's up. And I see the doctor, and he says, yeah, mate, it's your stitches there. We can't let you go to the octagon with stitches. I'm like, Jesus Christ, okay. So he took the stitches out there, and then that was that. But that was a close call. But there was many, many, many of those over the years.
Was there ever a time, I mean, the things that you would have gone through just leading into fights that would have been terrifying. I feel like fighters never have to, no one can question a fighter's courage, right? You go into a cage, you fight another man, you've got your man card for life. But were you ever scared or worried, not so much of your opponent, but, you know, knowing you know, your eye condition and what could potentially happen in a fight?
Yeah, so to your point, what you started with, obviously fighting another man, the physical side of things, not trying to sound macho or brave. Mm-hmm. You know, this is what we sign up to do. You know, when you're training, preparing for a fight, you spar 2-3 times a week, sometimes more, sometimes less. And the fight is just an accentuated version of a sparring match, essentially. So when you go into a fight, you're not scared of the physical. You're not scared of getting punched in the face. You're scared of losing. You're scared of failing in your mission, you know, going down in the rankings, not getting the title shot, losing your belt, whatever the ramifications may be. But the actual physicality of fighting a man, that doesn't scare me, or fighters in general. Excuse me. I just scarfed down some soup before we did this. It's kind of repeated me a little bit. I apologize. But regarding So I had a messed up eye. It's this one here, right? And this is a fake eyepiece. It comes out, but I'm not going to do that before you ask. We did a good job. It looks pretty good. It looks almost identical.
Yeah,
but anyway, so I have one good eye. And people would say, you got to stop fighting, Michael. I remember one doctor saying, okay, you're cleared for the medical, but by the way, the clearance, the benchmark you have to pass is 2200 vision, which is still clinically blind. And I don't know if I was technically passing that either, but whatever, that's another story. But they said, you got to be careful because you've only got one good eye. And if anything ever happened to that good eye, Michael, you'll be blind. And I was like, well, lightning's not going to strike twice. Look at how many fighters we have on the UFC roster all around the world getting a detached retina due to trauma. You don't hear about it too often. So I thought, lightning's not going to strike twice. Anyway, I fight George St. Pierre. I lose that fight. He knew I was blind in one eye. He targeted it. Then I fly out to Shanghai, pardon me. A couple of weeks later, I fight Kelvin Gastelum. I get cracked off him with a good one, and that was that. And then we go to an after party afterwards, and I'm sitting there in this club, and every time I looked this way, I get a flash of light. I'm like, what was that? So I looked again, another flash of light. And every time I looked to the left, I would get a flash of light, and I started panicking because I'm thinking, holy shit, I don't believe this. I've got a detached retina in my good eye. And I started getting emotional. in a nightclub. I'd had a couple of drinks, but I'm like, fuck, I think I'm going to go blind. Because even if they could have fixed the eye, it's going to be a few weeks while the surgery repairs. So I'm going to be blind at least for a little bit. And that's a terrifying thought to have, to actually go blind. So I left this nightclub because I didn't want to be sitting there and bloody tears rolling down my face and people thinking, oh, look at this soft cunt. He's crying because he lost a fight. I'm like, no, I think I'm going to go blind.
Yeah.
So I leave the club and I go back to my hotel. And a few of my mates came back and, a little while after came to see me and whatnot, see if I was okay. Anyway, we have a good drink, a very, very good drink. So by the time I've sobered up, I've forgotten all about my eye at this point. I got to go to the airport. I fall asleep on the plane. It's a long flight back to LA. And I wake up halfway through and I look to my left and then there's that flash of light. Holy shit, I've forgotten all about that. So when I land, I call my eye doctor straight away. Sorry if this is taking a while.
No.
I call my eye doctor straight away and he's like, yeah, you need to see someone. So I go in there and whenever I'm uncomfortable, I always use humor as kind of like a mask. And I went in and I see this doctor and I said, listen, doc, I think I've got a detached retina in my good eye. He's all right, well, let's take a look. He says, we're going to put some drops in. You're not going to be able to see for a while. And I make a joke. I say, oh, well, I guess I better get used to this view. Hey. And he says, oh, well, calm down. We're not there just yet. And I was like, we're not fucking there just yet. Jesus Christ. I was kidding. And anyway, it turns out I had a vitreous detachment. So from your iris, which is the colored part here, to the retina at the back, there's fluid called vitreous fluid and millions of fibers which attach to the retina at the back of the eye. And in your 60s or 70s, due to old age, that would just kind of separate from the retina nice and smoothly. But due to trauma, it can detach or partially detach. And I had a partially detached retina. And every time I would see, partially detached vitreous, pardon me. And every time I would see that flash, that's another fiber pulling from the retina. And so you've got to be careful because every time that pulls, it can cause the retina to tear. So anyway, I was like, okay, well, that's it. The game's up. It's time to retire. I don't want to go blind.
And you don't lie about the fact that you read medical journals, Mike, because I feel like we're talking to an optometrist right now. Very good description of what was going on.
I know nothing about eyes, but after the amount of eye operations and meetings and stuff I've been through with eye doctors, yeah, I know a little bit. And I'm probably, listen, don't repeat any of that. I just butchered that majorly. Anybody that's studying any kind of optometry right now is probably shaking their head hearing this interview because I've definitely got that wrong, but I feel that I'm at least, I would say 85% right.
Well, we'll give you a license from what we can see. But let's just quickly, just on that, you mentioned fighting GSP and then going over there and fighting Kelvin Gastelum. A lot of people talking about that part of your career. Looking back on it, and especially when you're writing the book, do you have any regrets on how you sort of finished out those last couple of fights? The Kelvin Gastelum fight obviously was a tough one for you. If you could replay it in another way, would you have done it differently?
Yeah, well, see, the thing was, as I said before, I always knew I was on borrowed time, right? And my goal when I got into fighting was always to take care of my family. I'll give them the life that I never had. I left school at 16. It's not an unusual story. It's a very common story. I left school at 16, no qualifications, no job, dead end job. Then one after the other. I've done every shitty job under the sun. And in my mid-20s, I got to a point where I was like, man, I am over this. There's got to be more to life. And then I discovered, mixed martial arts. And I did it all for a monetary reason. I did it to give my family a good life. Now, I won the belt. Obviously, that comes with some extra cash. And then I had a big fight against George St. Pierre. Now, when I fought George St. Pierre, just getting that license to fight in New York, that was very, very hard. I won't go into details, but they made me jump through so many hurdles. I'd sign disclaimers, get letters of doctors, second opinions, all kinds of stuff. And on the last week of training, just again, a sparring partner picked me up and dumped me. He went for a takedown like his life depended on it. And he landed on me and tore all the cartilage in my ribs. And I couldn't hardly move. And this was a huge fight. George St. Pierre is a massive draw. This was going to be a massive, massive payday. Now, if my eye condition wasn't like it was, I probably would have withdrawn from the fight and said, all right, we'll do it another time. But, I had to do it. So whatever, I had a shitty performance and fair play to George, you beat me. And then from there, I knew I was almost done. But then Anderson Silva failed his steroid test and Kelvin Gastelum needed another opponent. I was overtrained for the GSP and I was like, you know what, screw it, whatever. It is what it is. I'll fly out there and get another payday. So I went out there and, listen, money's one thing and legacy's another. You can't buy a legacy. So I do regret doing that Kelvin Gastelum fight because I had no business doing that. I was overtrained. In fact, I didn't train for that fight whatsoever. I was overtrained for the GSP one. Then I went on the piss for a couple of weeks and then flew out to China with my mates. You know what I mean? He was training for the biggest fight of his life. I'd already been choked out a couple of weeks ago. So, you know, the conditions weren't right. But there was a lot of money on the table. And I was like, well, I knew I was almost done. And for me, that's why I got into this. You know, so I got into it to give, you know, my family a better life. And as I say, I won't go into the actual number, but it was a big number. It was a huge number. And I'm like, all right, well, I'll go and collect that and I'll fly out to China. So,
China was safe back then.
China was safe. I don't know. Is China ever safe? They're eating dogs, they're eating bats, they're eating snakes.
You guys didn't go to any wet markets, did you, after the fight?
What, sorry? Wet markers? What's a wet marker?
Oh, that's where apparently the coronavirus originated, in one of the wet markets, yeah.
Oh, wet market. Sorry, part of it. Yeah, I'm not sure. No. I flew to China, got knocked out, got pissed, and flew home.
I think one of the things in your career that people love, Michael, was obviously the lead-ups to the fights and also the fun rivalries that you had in this sport. I'm just wondering, is there anybody in this sport that you had a rivalry with or a beef with at the time, and then now that you're a retired fighter, you're sort of, I don't know if I would say buddies, but maybe you realize you have more in common with that person than maybe you realized at the time?
I would say most people, to be honest. You know, I mean, like I'm a different person now from when I was fighting. That's for sure. You know, I don't walk around. You know, I'm not in a weight class. Before, anytime anyone was in my weight class, they were kind of my enemy. You know, and they were my enemy or my opposition. They were definitely my opposition, and I was always sizing people up. And I feel that when you meet under those circumstances, it's a very unique set of circumstances that you might potentially fight one day. So therefore, you don't want to get too close. For example, Luke Rockhold. Me and Luke Rockhold, I mean, yeah, listen, the guy's still a bit of a tit, isn't he? Let's be honest. But I will say this. You know, Daniel Cormier, DC, is a great guy. I got a ton of respect for that man. And he's like best mates with Luke Rockhold, right? So I guess Luke Rockhold can't be that bad. Otherwise, DC wouldn't be friends with him. So I think if we met under different circumstances, who knows? We could be going surfing together. Not that I surf, but you know what I'm saying. So
what about a pint? Do you see yourself having a pint with Rockhold now that it's all ancient history?
Yeah, I don't give a shit, mate. I don't hold grudges against anybody. Well, there's a couple of people back in England that if I get my hands on them, I'll wring their necks. But other than that, there's nobody professional. And listen, those days are behind me now. I've got no ill will. I wish everybody the best. I don't hold any grudges. And yeah, I'd happily share a beer with Rockhold. I remember I was commentating in Raleigh. It was me, DC, and Brendan Fitzgerald. And DC, he's a bit of a bad influence. He was trying to get me out the night before with him and Rockhold. And I'm like, mate, listen, you don't want to do that. I'm working in the morning. If I'm going to be commentating, I don't drink the night before. Otherwise, things get a little bit messy. But yeah, listen, I've got no qualms about having a beer with anybody.
Last couple of questions, Michael, we'll let you go because we know you're a busy guy. Just quickly, you're a great champion. There's been so many great champions in the middleweight division. What are your thoughts about Israel as a champ? He's really made a name for himself and is really a young star in the division that has a lot of great challenges coming up. And eventually, obviously, this Jon Jones fight that a lot of people are sort of talking about.
Yeah, well, first off, he's outstanding. He's great. You know, he's undefeated, which is very, very marketable. He looks good. He talks good. He fights good. You know, I mean, the guy's a superstar. He's got all the qualities that the UFC are looking for in a superstar. You know, and he fights great. Okay, the last fight against Yoel, you know, nobody wants to rewatch that one again. But that's the way it goes. You know, no, listen. You can't deny it was a shitty fight. Doesn't mean he's a shit fighter. Because he's not a shit fighter. He's outstanding. He's the world champion for a reason. But, you know, now and again, that's just stylistically. Sometimes that happens. You know, Yoel's he's a serious knockout artist. He has a lot of power and obviously has the wrestling pedigree. So, you know, you got to be careful. And it takes two to tango. So they were both as bad as each other. It was a shitty fight. It is what it is. He got the decision. Forget about that. That's in the past. It's all history. But, no, he's outstanding. He's going to have a bright future. He's still young. And I like what he's doing with Jon Jones. You know, I like what he's doing. I don't know if that fight will ever happen. It probably won't. Not anytime soon. I think Jon's talking about going up to heavyweight, so obviously that would put a barrier between that. But I like it. I certainly like seeing Israel talk shit about Jon Jones. You know, it is funny. I do sit there in the morning eating my cornflakes and get a little chuckle out of it. So, yeah, No, he's great. He's great. I'm a big fan.
I was gonna say, if that fight ever happened, is it a matchup that sort of interests you? Israel's spoken to us that he would happily go to heavyweight to sort of fight Jon Jones even at that weight class.
Yeah. So what was the question? I had something in the background that something went on. So what was the question? How do I see the fight going down with Jon Jones? And listen, on the feet, they'd match up pretty well, to be honest. I can't see why Israel wouldn't have at least an equal footing or potentially an advantage. Jones isn't, we saw in his last few fights, he's not invincible. He's not superhuman. He is beatable. Everybody's beatable, trust me. And Jon, the longer he does it, the longer he goes. It's kind of a game of odds. At some point, somebody's going to beat him, and it seems to be happening more and more. I mean, the fight against Dominic Reyes, and I'm not trying to dump on Jon Jones, but I feel that Reyes won that fight. The one before it, Thiago Santos, that was a close fight. And Thiago Santos had a bloody blown ACL from round one. Fight before that, Anthony Smith. So, Jon isn't unbeatable. Jon's not unbeatable. And Adesanya is also undefeated. They're both pretty much undefeated in my eyes. It's a great fight. I'd love to see it one day. But I'm not sure if I could see Israel at heavyweight. That's why I kind of laughed there, because he's a small, not small. He's certainly not short. He's very tall, but he's a light middleweight at the end of the day. So at heavyweight, he's going to have a big disadvantage there.
So, some fascinating stuff there. We want to wrap up and circle back to you. Your book is called Quitters Never Win. Before we finish up and everyone goes down and gets a copy, just quickly, what does that title mean to you, especially with what you've done with your career and fighting on with so much stuff happening?
Yeah, well, to be honest, I don't profess to be an inspirational guy. I'm not one of these guys that goes on Instagram and try to inspire people and and preaching at people and all that crap. To be honest, a lot of them they need to take a good long look in the mirror and get a hold of themselves. But the amount of kind messages that I get from people about the book, it really is mind-blowing. It is touching, and I do truly appreciate it. Literally every day on Instagram, somebody messages and say, "Hey, Mike, I've got your book. It really is helping me getting through tough times, or I've had a lot of setbacks in my life, and seeing what you went through and still became champion is very inspirational to me." So, yeah, I guess it's a story about not giving up, about persevering. If anything in life is worth having, it's worth fighting for. Metaphorically or literally, it's worth fighting for. It's worth, making those sacrifices for. I made so many sacrifices. My wife made so many sacrifices. Nothing in life worth having will come to you easy, right? And it's just like, that old saying, if at first you don't succeed, try again. And that's what I did. I made it to number one contender. I got beat. I made it to number one contender again. I got beat. I made it to number one contender, lost an eye. Do you know what I mean? Just kept going and going and going. But I knew I was good enough. I knew I could do it. I knew I had the ability, and I didn't give up. So I think for that reason, the name of the book was perfect. Quitters Never Win. Unless you're trying to give up smoking.
Well, there you go. You say you're not a motivational speaker, but I tend to disagree, Michael. He's an MMA legend, Hall of Fame. You can buy Michael's book here in Australia at Dimmicks locally or online, of course, at all other great online bookstores. You can get the audiobook even on Google Play. An excellent rating there. Pick it up now. Listen to Michael on his podcast, Believe You Me, where Michael and stand-up comedian Louis J. Gomez absolutely kill it. One of the most positive comment sections you'll find on any channel. Find him also on Instagram at Mike Bisping and Twitter at Bisping. Thank you so much for your time, Michael. Really appreciate it.
No, that's awesome. Thank you very much. Very, very professional job there, rhyming off all the social media handles, etc. So, yeah, no, I appreciate that, guys. And thanks for the kind words on the podcast. We have a lot of fun there. So, yeah. All right. And listen, you guys, you do a fantastic job. Keep it up. Keep up the good work. And, yeah, I'll see you around.
Thank you so much, Mike. Catch you later, man. Have a great day.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.
All the best. Bye-bye.